Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of the Squid Kiwi podcast with guest. Today's episode is going to be the Motherload from In the Keep podcast. Very special guest today, featuring second time I got another podcaster from another podcast onto my podcast. But yeah, it's great to have you here, Motherload. How are you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm coming at you live from my mother's back porch in deep South Alabama. So, bear with me if there's any birds chirping and all that kind of stuff, but it's very peaceful and nice and warm. So hopefully this will be a fun time.
Gotcha. Yeah, so Motherload will not be joining us in matches because of his, where he is right now in his situation. So I'm just going to be playing on random pub servers. But, yeah, go ahead and start off telling me a little bit about In the Keep and stuff like that.
Yeah, so long story long, In the Keep started off from my extreme obsession with Quake. I'd say it happened at first when I was in high school. Me and my friends in our business tech class kind of realized that we had a land at our disposal and started playing Quake 3 all the time. Then I, didn't really think about it much until I was maybe 22 or 23. I was in the Air Force. And I got myself a badass gaming computer, and I was like, well, what games are out there? And I remembered Quake, and that was around the same time that Quake Champions was coming out. Then I went deep dive all the way in. I think for folks who listened to your episode with the Full Tech podcast guys, they covered a bit of this history, but we were, riding that wave of Quake Champions so hard, and there was a really great podcast at the time ran by two dudes named Unkind and Slip called The State of Quake, and it was really, really a fantastic show if you were into the esport side of Quake. So they covered everything. They covered updates, character changes, development, the Pro League, everything that was going on at the time. And I was enamored with it. I absolutely loved their show. But unfortunately, they were very slow to put out episodes. So I volunteered to start doing some interviews of my own. And I was like, I'll interview the best of the best that I can find in terms of Quake esports or whatever. And about 6 episodes into that, I was like, hey, I think it's time for me to spread my wings and fly. So In the Keep was born. And I took that, I think around episode 7, I interviewed Locktar, who's one of the greatest Quake World players of all time. And then, I think I had interviewed Cygib, who was a great Quake Champions pro. And then the list goes on from there. I talked to Fatality. I talked to, the people who are running what's now the Quake and Doom community, or the Quake World community. I think they split off at some point. But Messiah and Nationwide Moose. I got deep into the multiplayer Doom Federation and all the things that came with that. So I had a pretty wide breadth of the old school multiplayer community at that point. And then I think the big change was when Dusk came out. That was kind of the first of the boomer shooter craze. I'd say there were definitely other games that met the criteria, but it was right place, right time, right game for Dusk. I even ran a couple of Dusk World tournaments. no lie, it was a total shit show, but it got attention. And then I ended up on a long kind of, I would say, tangent where it was all what was going on in that scene. So I interviewed folks from 3D Realms, from Dread XP, everybody who was doing a boomer shooter at the time. So Proteus, Wrath, Graven, God, I can't even name them all at this point, but all that stuff. I really, really loved that scene. And after a while, I think you'll notice as you continue to do your Quake podcast, you get to a point where you've done everything and covered everything. So then I was like, okay, well, what else am I interested in? And then it became more broadly about game development in general. So whether that be indie or never really AAA, it's not. I think there's enough people doing that. So, but whatever highlights the people who are out there doing the hard work, making their own games and stuff, I was super interested in talking about. So that spread into horror, into survival, into whatever. And here we are now.
Nice, nice. Yeah, that is a quite big piece of history. Honestly, you were going through all those names, and I'm just like, I don't know who any of those people are.
Well,
But
Fatality, for example, was like the first ever guy to like be a truly like, money-making sponsored esports player ever. Uh, he he was even featured on MTV at one point because of I think it was an Unreal tournament. No, yeah, I guess that they go together. But yeah, he was covered on MTV doing that, but he had already made his world name in Quake 3, and he started selling like sponsored mouse pads and all that kind of stuff, and it was the beginning of the esports business. Just as one example of like the kind of people I'm talking about.
yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I heard a little bit about Fatality, and I know a little, like I know Messiah from Quake World, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those are, yeah, I've heard those are all pretty big names there. So I'm glad to have them in the Quake community and stuff like that. I'm glad they're doing big things, and whatever they're doing now. Are they? Do a lot of them still play? Or are they like all retired?
Well, it's kind of a spread out case. You know, some of these people were famous 20 years ago, right, for playing games, and then some of them are still active. So I mentioned Cygib, for instance. He's been as recently as a few years ago was active in the Quake Champions Pro League. Uh, I mean, I have not interviewed Rafa. I've always wanted to, but you know, he's been someone who's been he's had longevity in his career, right? Like he started off playing probably Quake 3, and then was really, really famous during Quake Live, and then continued on, and then still is dominating the world of Quake Champions. So you have a lot of Quake is almost a uniquely, uh, it's uniquely a game where people can have a really long career. You don't really see that in CS:GO or other things. Granted, a career is like in quotation marks, like how much money can you really make as a sponsored Quake player unless you work for Team Liquid or something like that. But CS:GO players last for 6 months to 2 years, just like professional athletes do, whereas Quake players can play for 20 years, it seems.
Nice, nice. And Morph from the YouTube comments live chat here says, "I recognize this cool dude." See, I told you this. There were people excited to have you on here.
I'm glad
yeah,
they're there. I should probably pull it up, eh?
yeah. If you
That'd be
wanna,
nice.
I mean, I try to
But
read
at least I
everything
can
in
see the
chat
chat.
here, but yeah, yeah, that's really cool. I'm glad you shared all those big names there. So that's yeah, I do agree that it's Quake's got the probably the longest in all the esports. I mean, I think a lot of people have agreed. Quake I think kind of like started the whole esports kind of thing there. So yeah, it's definitely the most the biggest of them all there, because it's still going even today here, and people still run tournaments and stuff, and cash prizing tournaments and stuff, not just like people just running random stuff there. So yeah, that's pretty cool and everything. So yeah, I'm glad there's a lot of communities out there that are running Quake here, and this whole podcast here, to kind of like my general idea is to like promote QE specific. Have you ever like played like QE and stuff like that? Quake
So
remastered.
So I have not played the Quake remaster at all. You're referring to the Night Dive version with the Kex engine and everything. It's not
Right.
out of not wanting to. It's just like I haven't gotten around to it. I've heard like mixed reviews. I've heard people say that they absolutely love it. I've heard people say it's like it's not exactly Quake World. I don't really hold anything to that standard, but like it seems as good as like say Blood Fresh Supply was to Blood, which is a compliment for me.
The best I can explain it is it's not Quake World at all. It's basically NetQuake with client side prediction is the best way I
Okay.
can say that. So it's kind of like if you like more like the NetQuake physics and the NetQuake like movement and stuff, then you would come play QE or something like that. But yeah, no, it's nothing like Quake World. So if you're going in with that expectation, you're just gonna be disappointed. But I like it. I play it. It's the Quake I main. It's actually where I started from, so that's just where I does it. But yeah, I know it's not for everybody. A lot of people are just like, like, oh yeah, we have Quake World, so let's just go play Quake World or something like that. And that's fine. I mean, like, if you like Quake World, just go play Quake World. But yeah, I think you should give it a try and just give it your own opinion like that. There, either you're gonna hate it or you're gonna love it. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, from personal enjoyment point of view, right? All that really matters is like where are people playing. Like I'll play Quake 4 if there's like a significant number of people who want to play that I'm friends with. Like that's no problem. But I think that the intention, right, of this remaster was more about the single player, and then ultimately I don't. This is a conspiracy theory, but I assume, like, let's have Night Dive do that remaster and see what the interest would be in, say, like a Quake remake or something along those lines, or a new Quake in general in a single player sense, because Quake Champions already exists. Like Hugo Martin and people who have been interviewed about Doom and such have said as much. They're like, yeah, the multiplayer thing is there, but and the other part of it is like from a business standpoint, like is there money in it? And so you're saying that there's a pretty significant scene of like cash prizes and stuff going on in QE these days, or?
Oh yeah. We haven't ran anything recently, but I don't know if you know Dan the Man, Bacteria, Steph. Those names ring a bell, but yeah, no, they run cash tournament prizes, stuff like that. Our last one was a big FFA tournament we had. When was that? Like, I think like winter of 2022 or something like that. So it's just we still run tournaments there. I'm actually trying to. I thought about running a so QA has this mode called Horde mode, and it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's you're playing against like the Quake 1 enemies from the campaign, and you team up and stuff like that. I thought about running that there, but there's a concern of cheating, and I haven't exactly figured out how to get around that. So I'm still trying to think of that. I do really want to do it. I just haven't really thought about how we can do it in a way where I don't think people would cheat. But yeah, no, there are cash prize tournaments that we still do over at QE. So yeah, that's something to check out if you're interested in that kind of stuff.
And I assume that like custom maps and everything are totally on the table, whatnot, even in competition. So if it's like a community agreed upon map, or is it before? I know you're about to interrupt, but like I need to complete this. So Quake World has always had this problem where there's basically 5 professional maps for singles, right? And is that the case here, or are you playing on other things?
So with QE, if we're talking just pubbing, like public servers, it's only going to be the classic maps. Because QE is a game where they brought console players to it, and there's apparently some ego stuff involved with downloading some of the third-party maps for console players or something. I don't know the full story of it, but that's kind of how it was. However, you can play on custom dedicated servers and stuff like that in QE. I mentioned, like Denver before. Denver is one of our more popular dedicated servers there, and yeah, you can play that in QE. The only problem though is that it doesn't automatically download the maps, so you have to like manually download the maps and put them in your map folder. But other than that, you can play like the custom maps and stuff like that. Yeah,
that's always interesting with multiplayer communities in general, because you're facing a really big inconvenience that's already been solved somewhere else. So that does speak to the quality of this community, that you like everyone that I see in this server, for instance, is like agreeable that's something they'll tolerate, because that's, I mean, for example, Warfork community was the same way, where they only wanted to play the old Warsaw maps, and then over time, like, we would just integrate other maps into tournaments, like as wild cards or whatever. We'd just say like, okay, your tiebreakers will be played on this map that no one's played before, to like absolutely give no advantage, because how people like map specialize and stuff. Like that's always been a thing in Quake. So I don't know. It's interesting. I wish that there were more diversity in general, but it sounds like you guys are pretty agreeable. It's like, yeah, we could just load our own maps, no big deal. And also communicate that online. I assume you have like places for people to go grab them, websites or.
Yeah. Steph has a map collection of CRX maps, but also
Yeah.
you can just download the Quake World Map Pack. I mean, I have like a I have like a I want to say probably like 6-7 gigabyte map folder just of like all the CRX maps, and the Quake World maps that I've downloaded over time just to be able to play on the custom servers and stuff like that, dedicated servers. So. But yeah, it's really cool there. I know it's QE's not the perfect client out there. I realize that there's other better clients there, but it suits me and I like playing it, and I'm probably gonna continue playing it until
Yeah.
it officially dies. So that's just my opinion of it.
No, man, I've ridden that wave many times. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's just part of the game of being into this sort of genre, is that every like so many years there's some sort of big thing that kind of brings it back and creates a resurgence and everyone's excited, and then it goes away for a while and the servers go away, and then eventually it happens again. It's been going on for, the better part of 25 years now, maybe more. So if you count Doom, yeah.
Speaking of conspiracy theories, do you think there's a Quake 2 remastered coming?
I don't know about Quake 2 Remastered. It seems like it would be pretty easy to do. And I can speak from like my own experience in production.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I worked on Kingpin Remastered for a while, right? And I was the producer, so like project management and, like kind of managing the entire team, the whole deal. And so Kingpin was in the Quake 2 engine, right? But we didn't have the source code, obviously, to it, except for like a limited amount of time, to my understanding. So basically, like, the programmer, his name's Captain Death, online if you find him somewhere. He just rebuilt the entire Quake 2 engine in Unity, and it's like works flawlessly. I mean, it's a modified version, granted, for Kingpin, but I mean, the bones are there. It works. Knowing what Night Dive can do, either with the Kex engine or just their like amazingly impressive team of programmers, like I'm pretty sure they could pull it off. It's just a matter of whether or not Bethesda wants to do it, right?
Yeah.
That's what I would think. And now, I will say that the recent buyout from Atari, like, put that in question for me. I'm like, I wonder if that's gonna complicate their relationship with, id Software and such. So that may also be a factor. To me, it's just like, the only thing preventing me from saying absolutely they're gonna do it is just like, I would think that there's some legal reason that they've decided to postpone.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about Bethesda, their legal team is like most of their development. It's like.
Yeah, I was gonna say with the Atari remastered, it might not even be Night Dive doing it. It might just be like, Bethesda wanting to do it themselves or something like that. Who's the one that did the Doom remastered? Was that Bethesda, or was that someone else that did that? Because I know it wasn't Night Dive.
Is it the Doom remaster, like the one that they released? Just
yeah, the
like on PC.
Well, I shouldn't say Doom. I should say Unity port, but yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna say that I don't know this for a fact, but this is just like the narrative that I put together in my head about how that went down.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the person's name is Alex Max, was like kind of one of the big programmers behind that, and had been very active. I even talked to him on I think an episode of Doom is Dead podcast a long time ago. And he was, worked on that with Bethesda or with id Software, probably, and then that was kind of the door into Night Dive taking over afterwards, because the last I checked, Alex Max worked for Night Dive. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's what I think. I don't know that to be a fact, and don't take any quotes from this and be like Motherload said or whatever.
If Motherload said it, it means it's true. No, I'm just kidding. But
that's just like that timeline makes sense to me. Like, that seems like it's what happened. I'm sure there were other connections going on. They were definitely talking. Because holy shit, at Night Dive, I can't suck their dicks enough, man. They're awesome. Love those guys. Larry Cooperman is like one of the coolest dudes in the world, and so is Stephen King.
That's cool. That's good. Is Steven or Stefan, is he still with Night Dive after the Atari buyout? I don't know if
I don't know. I as far as I know, he's definitely still the CEO and owns the company and all that, or is still in charge of the company. But I haven't spoken to him in a long time. He kind of like goes offline, for periods of time. Yeah, he's the kind of person who will just like get in his car with his wife and just drive down to Mexico for a long period of time or some shit. So I mean, if I became a millionaire suddenly, like he did, I would probably do something like that. But I don't know. I haven't talked to him, and yeah, forever. Larry, I talk to all the time though, and I guess I could ask him that kind of stuff, but it's like not personal.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, was it Kingsman? You mentioned, is that a 3D realm game, or is that like?
Okay. Kingpin Reloaded is a remaster of an old game called Kingpin Life of Crime. It was from the early 2000s, and it was built in the Quake 2 engine. A lot of games were at the time. There are plenty of examples of like, yeah, people who were using that sick, badass Quake 2 technology to make their new game, because that's what, it made their money off of selling engine licenses, basically. I mean, that was the genius of having John Carmack doing all that stuff. Daikatana, not the least of, all the examples you could throw out there. So anyway, Kingpin Reloaded is a remaster of this sort of crazy, weird Quake 2 engine game from the early 2000s. That's the best way to put it.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of all that, do you want to talk a little bit about your 3D Realms work? I don't know what you're allowed to talk about and what you're not allowed to talk about, but what's some of the work you do over there?
So I originally joined, I guess began working with 3D Realms because of their event Realms Deep. Mm-hmm. So I had interviewed Fred Schreiber, who's the CEO of the company now. At the time, he was the vice president. I'd interviewed him on my podcast, and he invited me in, I guess this was like late 2019 or so. He's like, for 2020, it was like COVID lockdown. He's like, we want to have our own games convention, with, blackjack and hookers, basically, because, their E3 wasn't happening. All QuakeCon wasn't really happening. Like, none of the usual outlets for that sort of game were there. So, and at the time, it was mostly boomer shooters at 3D Realms. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, he was like, you want to do the interviews for this? It'd be really cool to have, like, podcasts and stuff, and we'll make a big, like a showcase and show off all these cool indie games, too, that are coming out, and then maybe we'll publish some of them, and that is exactly what happened. So, yeah. I got involved with them through that, but I really quickly, I was just really involved, I guess, in the whole process, because I didn't have anything else to do. I was in the Air Force, so I was like doing my podcast on the weekends and in the afternoons and stuff, and like otherwise I was just at work. So yeah, I really poured myself into that first Realms Deep and planning it and recruiting all of the different indie developers who ended up showcasing their games there, and just doing a lot of networking. Then that continued over the course of what will soon be 4 years, right? Of Realms Deep, and I've been really involved in it ever since. They hired me on an internship program, because when you get out of the military, you have the option to do like an internship, right, where you can just jump over and basically like train in a new job, right?
Yeah, I gotcha.
And hopefully that leads to your success in the civilian world. That's the way they look at it. And it's a great program. I recommend anybody who's in the service and thinking about getting out. Like, you can even do it in the middle of your service, actually. You just be like, I want to take 6 months to go like work at this beer brewery in Alaska and learn how to do that, so when I get out I'll have a skill. And they're like, okay, we'll pay for that. As long as you're not, pending deployments or whatever. Like, if you have the time, they'll usually let it happen. But anyway, so 3D Realms like brought me on for that internship as I was getting out of the Air Force, and then they just hired me full time when my contract was up. Originally as a project manager, so I was talking about working on Kingpin and also working on Combustion. Is the other game that I was assigned to, and they're both well into development now. Like, really gonna be. I see that in the comments, someone asking about 2023 hints. Like, I'm gonna keep my cards close to my chest on these things, but there will be lots of announcements at Realms Deep. September 23rd, or no, September 30th. I'm a week ahead of time for some reason. September 30th, live on our Twitch channel, you will find out the answers to all your questions. But yeah, after
he mentioned September 23, something's happening that day too.
No, September 2023, September 30th, 2023.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah, so originally as a project manager, and then after a year of doing that, I was still floating in between marketing and production because I was still running Realms Deep, and I was working on some other projects that were really marketing related, and like localization was a big focus of mine. Like I wanted to work on those sorts of things, which all fell under a different department than the one I was assigned to. So I just asked to be moved full time into marketing instead of development because at the end of the day, it's like most of the projects I was working on fell into that category anyway. So like my job title is marketing assistant, and what that means is I do a lot of different stuff. I can't even like list it all.
Yeah.
But to name a few things, like stuff like this, doing community outreach, whatever that may be. If it's a small podcast or a big one or whatever, like they like to send me to talk at things. Go to Gamescom, if you need to talk to the press about a game, I'm that person sometimes. I want to do more in the world of podcasting. I'll leave it at that for now. I think that In the Keep will continue its hiatus for a while, and then I'll do something else, but you'll see when it happens, if it happens. That's the attitude I have about it right now. And then the other parts of it are like working, coordinating between development teams and PR, or just like, hey, we just realized that there's this huge exploit on Steam where people in Argentina can buy our game for like 30 cents, right? Like something like that will happen. It's like, hey, can y'all solve that for us? And like that kind of stuff. So it really keeps you in the loop on everything to do with what's going on, like with the development team. Like I'm still actively like trying to contribute to the projects that I like was assigned to originally. But yeah, I think marketing in general was like a better fit for me because I'm not really good at like holding people accountable for stuff. I noticed that like maybe it's a military thing, but I always just assume that people will do their job because they're told to. Mm-hmm. And then in the real world, it's like everybody was super cool that I worked with, but I mean, like you kind of have to rule with an iron fist in some cases when it comes to like team management. And I was like, I just want to be like friends with everybody. So just whenever you guys have stuff to say, to the public, let me know, and I'll gladly talk about how awesome the game is because that's how I really feel. I can't be in there like, why isn't this programming task done? Like that doesn't suit me anymore.
Yeah, no, I got you. You sound like you'd make a very good promoter and stuff. Like one of those people who just do like, live streams or on Twitch or something like that just to promote a game or something like that.
I don't enjoy saying negative things about. I don't even like notice negative things to point out a lot of the time, unless it's like I want this to be better, or like you were talking about having the ability to like upload in server your maps or download them straight into the game, that kind of thing. But like I would point out things like that and be like, it'd be nice to have, but I'm much like I think it's probably too much from the Quake community, and like I'm really willing to tolerate a lot of bullshit to play a good game. Like in 2023, the work that people put into maintaining these games like Quake and Doom especially like is astounding, right? Like because the vast majority of people want their gratification in 30 seconds from TikTok or whatever it is. Whereas this is a game for like, you have to have a lot of patience, even to just like get into the game. And then once you do, you get your ass kicked for like a year, and then you figure out how to strafe jump. And then you get your ass kicked by like one less person for a year, and then you slowly get there. Did you find when you started playing that you were immediately talented, or did you have to...
I came from Team Fortress Classic, so
okay.
I kind of had TFC is a different game compared to Quake. The movement is a lot slower and stuff like that. I would say the skill, like some of the skills, kind of transferred from that game, and then I kind of just built from that point on and built from there. So. I mean, like when I first started, it did take a little bit used to some of the stuff that you mentioned, like the movement and stuff. But ultimately, once you get kind of past that, you find yourself like you'll be able to just run around and just rocket people and and almost not even paying attention to what you're doing anymore and stuff like that. Like kind of like a muscle memory kind of thing. That's what it's all about. It's really about the muscle memory. And being able
Yeah.
to time items and stuff. That's kind of what Quake's all about there. And yeah, that is a pretty big skill curve because people who've played this game for 20 years or something like that, they got like millisecond accuracy timing, so they can be like at the quad at like the second it spawns, or at the red armor, stuff like that. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I would say out of like a lot of games, I think Quake is a pretty easy game to learn because it's really like it's really a game where it's not like you're so focused on like what weapons to go grab. It's more just about the movements, the item timings, and once you get those mastered, it's not too bad after that.
Yeah. I've always loved 1v1s in any Quake game. Period. Because as you said, it's like a chess match. It's way more about like your control of the map and the items than it is about your amazing, twitch reflexes and stuff. In the terms of the fundamentals of how to like play any arena shooter. But yeah, but even it can be really daunting if you're. Let's say you didn't come from Team Fortress, right? Like, let's say you came from only ever playing like Overwatch or something like that, and you're asking a kid who's used to just like everything being super slick and easy and slow and all that kind of stuff. They're like, okay, now think while you run around and shoot. Like, it could be a different thing. It was for me, for sure. Like when I first like really got into it, I had to watch videos like this is how you move, and then get in servers and like have people like this is how you do a rocket jump, all that stuff. Because I couldn't do any of it at first. It was insane.
Gotcha.
And then learning that in each different Quake is even kind of its own thing. Like for instance, the self damage that you do to yourself with a rocket in Quake 1, for instance, is way different than later on in Quake Champions, where it's a small percentage.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I played Quake Champions with the slaughter community, and yeah, it is a very different game. It's not. I mean, I guess it's not too bad if you find like friends to play with it, but I definitely prefer Quake 1 over that game. Any day. One thing I wanted to say, because you mentioned the security stuff before. I don't know if you saw, but Smago's website, the Full Tech Podcast, it recently got breached. I don't know if you knew that, but yeah, it got breached. I don't know the full details about it, but it's a pretty scary thing when stuff like that happens. That's why it's important to take security measures, because it can happen even in a game like like Quake here. I mean, because if you think about it, like how you connect the servers and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not a developer, so I don't know like the full details how all that stuff works, but yeah, it's very important to take security measures when stuff like that happens, and have your backups, make sure you're keeping everything updated and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I hope he recovered everything he can there, Smago. I hope I'm saying your name right too. I'm bad at pronouncing, but yeah, I hope you recover from all that. You're in our hearts and everything like that, and I hope you catch the people who done that and have justice served, or all that good stuff.
Yeah, Smango, because he's a redneck, so we don't say mongos, we say mangoes, right? Yeah, but
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's just something you kind of like have to accept. I mean, especially games like when I was playing Bloodbath or whatever, like Duke Match, like you would have to connect peer to peer. There's no servers to connect to even. So like even that layer of security stripped away. You're basically just sending your IP address out into the ether if you're not careful. So
Definitely.
What do you do? Do you are you playing with a VPN on and shit now, or like?
No, I don't. I'm not that paranoid. The most I got is a commercial AV that that I got from my work and stuff. I can't talk too much about that, but my job installed it onto my computer. I have to have it on 24/7. I just use that. But outside of that, no, I'm not really a paranoid kind of thing. And also, Kiwi actually has encryption too, so stuff like that it's pretty hard to do in this game specifically. But in other games, no, I'm not usually concerned about that kind of stuff. I mean, like somebody would have to really hate me to go that far and to want to like breach a game just to attack me or something like that. I did used to run like servers back in like Left 4 Dead 2 and TF2 a long time ago. No, those were all pretty secured, and they were rented servers through Game Server, and their security is usually pretty good over there. So I was never really concerned about that kind of stuff. But to everybody who is running servers, take that into consideration. Make sure you keep your stuff updated and keep backup stuff like that, secure passwords, stuff like that. But yeah, thanks for mentioning that kind of stuff there. It did remind me to tell that to everybody.
Yeah, I don't understand any of that shit. I just have people like Smango explain to me what I should do step by step, and then I move on with my life.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, are there any upcoming games to look forward to over at 3D Realms or anything like that?
There's all kind of stuff going on. There's there's the crop of games that have kind of been on the docket for a while. So your Graven, Wrath are still in early access, but rounding the end of their development cycles. Of course, Kingpin Reloaded is something I already mentioned. Combustion I worked on, so everybody who knows me better go play it for sure.
Gotcha.
Very it was my first professional video game job too, so I'm very excited about that game when it does get released to the public. Cultic is still out in its first episode, and new stuff coming all the time from Jason. He's also part of our marketing team, so he's very often playing it on the Twitch channel and stuff, showing people this is what's going on with Jared or whatever. If you like RTS games, we have Tempest Rising is kind of one of the bigger things that we're co-publishing with THQ Nordic. It's like a spiritual successor to Command and Conquer for sure, in all the good ways. So I'm personally excited about that one because it's like us branching out and doing more stuff than just FPS, whereas Combustion is also not an FPS. And I think the boomer shooter thing has kind of it's had its time. It's but it's no longer in vogue, and I'd like to see just other genres explored with the same amount of enthusiasm that genre got supported by the kind of double A gaming community, I would say. Because there were a lot of really good titles. I mean, there were really, really good stuff from all the remasters that Night Dive did, and then there's all the Cultic is a great example. There's the Doom 64 remaster, and then there's just a slew of really badass games like Viscera Fest, for example, that just all fell into that genre. Proteus. And I would like to see the people who did that do other things that aren't just boomer shooters. So,
oh boy.
Golly, I mean, there's so much. There's, good gracious. Do you just want to hear about upcoming games that are 3D Realms games, or just in general? Because I'm excited about a lot of games.
No, yeah, I got you. Cultic, that one's kind of that's kind of similar to Blood and stuff, right?
I'd say, yeah, it plays in its own way, but it is very reminiscent of kind of the Blood visuals and attitude, and just the setting. It's got cultists and a lot of red. Yeah, so in that way, it is very much like Blood. And if you like Blood, you'll probably also like it. But it certainly has all of its own particular charms that make it an independent title, I would say. Yeah. Not just it wouldn't be right to call it a spiritual successor to Blood, because it would have to have Blood's sense of humor and voice acting and all that kind of shit, I would think.
Gotcha, yeah. It was definitely Miss Slaughter that got me into Blood and stuff, so I'll definitely look forward to that game. And then you mentioned Wraith there. I from what I remember, didn't that game kind of have some issue with the develop, or it switched developers or something like that? Am I thinking that right?
Yeah, I could kind of give you the quick rundown as I understand it. So Wrath was originally Wrath Aeon of Ruin is the title of the game.
Yeah.
To people listening, it was started off by this guy named Killpixel. His name's Jeremiah. Great guy, really, really cool guy. And I don't know that he was really, from interviewing him and such, I don't think he was a game developer. He was a guy who just dreamed up, I would like to make a game. And then he had a vision in his head of what he wanted to make, and then he jumped into the Quake community and figured out how to make a map, and then bada bing, bada boom, he's got this great idea for a game. And it was $1 million idea for a game, in my opinion. I was yeah, that sounds fucking awesome. Modern Quake style game with like its own enemies and own weapons and its own sort of way of being traversed through. But at the end of the day, it's like basically like an old school Quake kind of successor. And like that, especially at that time, that sounded like a big $1 million idea. And so it got picked up by 3D Realms. And then I think at a certain point, Jeremiah, I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I think it's like, he went from not being a game developer to that, like, this is your life now. And it just wasn't his thing, or at least the way that it was working at the time wasn't his thing. I don't know. I can't speak for him personally, but he ended up leaving the project. By that point, it had already been like they built a team around it. So it's like 3D Realms is the publisher, and then 3D Realms will oftentimes work with our internal studio, like most of the time, Slipgate Ironworks, right? Like that's the studio in the same building as 3D Realms. Mm-hmm. So like there are already people hired to help work on that game and such. And so when he left, that didn't just mean the entire development team quit, right? It's like, oh, well, there's still a game to be made here. And for that reason, it was, it went through a period of delay as they had to reorganize and figure out who was going to run the damn thing and all that. But yeah, now there's a great team of people who are kicking ass on it. One of the things that's like really, I think, what makes it super cool to me, or at least when I first kind of heard the pitch and I understood what was going to happen, is like with 3D Realms financing it, they were able to grab a lot of the best level designers who had been doing it, for like 20 years for free, right? Just perfecting their craft of making amazing Quake levels, and like let the batch of custom Quake levels that you can now go out and play and find in the world speak for themselves, right? And they're just able to like grab those people and be like, yeah, let's make some badass maps. And so you ended up with like a really rich development team in terms of like talent. It's just, it went through that period of delay as they had to like restructure and figure out who was going to run it.
Nice.
But yeah, and it's also one of those things where Wrath, I think it was a co-publishing deal, right? So it wasn't originally supposed to be early access, to my understanding, but the other publisher who is working on it were like, I think they just preferred it that way. Like they were like, yeah, we want to do the early access model, and it was like, okay, well, I have to do that. And so for that reason, it was announced maybe earlier than it should have been. That happens a lot, I'd say, in like upstart companies,
right?
Where they're like, and even my own company, I'll speak for In the Keep. Like I'm making Stellar Valkyrie, and I announced it way too early because you should never announce a game. If you want to be really successful in your marketing campaign, don't tell people 4 years before you're going to release the game that you're going to work on it, because people don't follow and pay attention to things for that long oftentimes.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, Wrath is pretty damn awesome.
Yeah, that's made on Dark Places engine, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that is a Quake 1 fork of, I think, GL Quake, probably some other Quake engine. But yeah, it's made on Dark Places engine, so it's pretty much going to feel like Quake 1. I mean, if you like Quake 1, that's definitely a game to go check out and stuff. But yeah, I do agree that there are a number of games that are released a little too early. I mean, what's that one game there that's had like a Kickstarter and stuff, and it was like released back in the Kickstarter was like back in 2012, and it's still like not even released right now. I kind of forget what the name of that game was, but yeah, I do agree that there are a number of games out there that have that release a little too early model there. Like Duke Nukem Forever there. I think that's a prime example of a game that probably could have had another year or so of development of that. Just to kind of make it a little bit like better than what it was.
Duke Forever was that game was, I think, started in development during the time of the 64, right? Like it was just reinvented over and over and over and over again. So
that is true. Yeah, that one was probably more of like. So going through so many different development switches that I think it kind of just lost touch somewhere around there or something like that. But yeah. Hopefully Wraith has a much better look on the development thing there. It does seem like it's going pretty good. I played a little bit of it. I didn't play a whole lot. I try not to play early access games because it kind of gives me like that mixed, like that mixed early review there. But I know like when it comes out a little later, it usually gets a lot better than that. So, but I am looking forward to the full release of that game there, and I see you guys are doing a lot of good work on that. And Cultic 2 is another one that I was looking forward to on. Well, I guess that game is technically full release. It's just that you guys are working on like episode 2, right?
So Cultic, yeah, it's a full release of Cultic episode 1, and then so episodes 2 and 3 are supposed to just like drop for people who have already bought the game, or add selling value to the next version of the game ultimately. So the next thing I believe is called Interlude. It's like between chapter 1 and 2, and that Jason is, as far as I understand it, very much working on it. I don't know exactly when it's going to drop. It's at his own. He's literally a solo developer with a publisher, so and a part-time marketing position too. So it's up to him, and I think that's good, healthy, as opposed to like a lot of companies would be like, all right, push it out right now, that kind of thing. But he's in a very like he works for a Danish company, right? Like he's in good hands as far as like work-life balance.
There's something I do want to ask you, and I don't know if it's something you can answer, but I'm just going to ask it anyways. There's always like these games that come out there, and like sometimes they have like a really bad release or something like that, and like a lot of times companies they get blamed for it, and usually a lot of times it's always like the publisher that gets blamed at it. So like how much development of a game does a publisher, like I know like the publisher kind of like decide, because like most of the time most of the money comes from them or something like that, but like if a game releases in a bad state, are people right to blame the publisher for it, or is that more like the developer's fault?
I mean, it could be a lot of different factors. I mean, the fact that any video game comes out ever at all is like every single one is a miracle. Like it's crazy how complicated it all can really get, especially. I mean, it's a reason I've always preferred the indie gaming community, because it's a lot less complicated. It's just like fund your thing and put it out and make money, and hopefully you break even or whatever. Or if you can turn it into a profit, good for you. But when you start talking about investors and publishers and all that kind of thing, then all of a sudden there is a numbers game, right? You can get a lot of freedom. There are ways to set up your development cycle so that you have a tremendous amount of freedom. But if somebody's got $300 million for that's talking Rockstar level, but like sunk into an investment, like you're going to answer for it. And if your game is taking like way too damn long, or is already losing money before it even comes out, or some stuff like that, like I understand why publishers at a certain point have to just say like, look, we got to make our money back. That's it. We got to at least try to break even here. And in those cases, I think it's right to say, it is the publisher's decision. I wouldn't even say fault. It's like that it's a decision they make. Now, sometimes you have shitty publishers who make really stupid decisions, in my opinion. When you have, I already brought up like just to fess up to something that I think that a lot of people that are now doing very well in the video game industry learned fast was don't announce your games too early, and nearly everyone did for a long time, and still has, and that's another huge mistake that I think people you could say that's the publisher's fault. But in a lot of cases, you have these indie games that are say they go into early access because that's how they're funding their game, right? Like it's the early access is how they're literally like paying for the development of the game, or Patreon or some shit like that. So you'll end up with people who have shared every waking detail of what's going on in development for sometimes years to their followers. And then they get picked up by a publisher, right? And in that case, I mean, who do you blame? Because it's already out there. It's out there that it's a thing. So you can't just like hide it necessarily. So the publisher still has like some responsibility, I guess, to honor the standing commitments from prior to that deal being made. But oftentimes that's just not like that sort of deal is not attractive to a publisher in general. So. It's hard to say like how often it's one or the other's case, and oftentimes you have just hiring problems. Like if you have a very particular style game that requires someone who's excellent at making, game AI for, insert genre name here, and you have to wait until you can hire that person. And sometimes they have other jobs and they're not interested in your thing, or they're gonna do it after they've finished something else they've done. And so I think that the gaming community, the people who are playing the games, especially, that demand a super high quality of things, should have a healthy amount of respect for the people who are making it and what they put into it.
Yeah.
Because it is an industry of people who like to, drink energy drinks and stay up all night and work, and then burn out. And that's always been the case. I think that I'm very lucky to work at a company, like I was saying about Jason from Cultic earlier, that's just like, yeah, just do what you can. Take the time you need. Human beings are more important than profit, necessarily. And you can do both. You can certainly make a profit and still treat people well. So I guess in that case, that can also be the publisher's problem. Or the development, if it's a large development group, like a company, not just like, an indie developer. I think in those terms too much. But let's say you're a small studio and you get hired by a publisher to publish a game that you're working on or that they want you to make for them. And you do the best you can.
Yeah.
That happens all the time. Obsidian is a great example. Like, they were just an amazing team that made badass RPGs. Then they did the Fallout New Vegas thing, and then they came back with like Obsidian, Pillars of Eternity, and all that kind of stuff. Like, they're just a badass studio that are kind of rogue agents to publishers.
Yeah.
Or in that case, Kickstarter campaigns.
Yeah, I gotcha. It was kind of a bad question, anyways, but.
No, it's a great question. It's something I think about a lot.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, definitely. I've always said that, to be honest, like, when Night Dive announced that Atari was buying them out and enough, there was a lot of, like, mixed opinions about that, because kind of like who Atari is and what they've kind of been known for and stuff like that. But I've always thought that it would have been better if like 3D Realms or even like THQ Nordic bought them out there, because those companies kind of focus on remasters too and stuff like that, and I think they just have a better like a better, like it would be a lot better for the community if like one of them did. But I guess it's a done deal and stuff like that, so what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah.
But
you've also got to think, like, in the market of, like, not just the amount of money they offer you, but what IPs that it opens up to you. So I don't know anything about the internal part of that deal other than just like, it happened and there was money exchanged, of course. But like, Atari were the rights holders to Blood when they did Blood Fresh Supply. And part of the reason why Blood Fresh Supply was like not what some people would call perfect is like that they had a limited time of access to work on it and to have the source code or whatever it was. And now that they're under the Atari umbrella, maybe that opens up some other doors. I don't know. There's all sorts of reasons why people go with one publisher or the other that's not just as fundamental as like how much money was involved. But sometimes it is. It's literally like, who's the highest bidder? So I don't think that at the time, like, 3D Realms itself could have afforded to just buy Night Dive, right? But someone a bigger fish like Atari or 3D Realms is a property of Saber Interactive or Saber Publishing, and then of course there's Embracer Group above that. And that's like there's a whole extra layer of upper echelon business going on behind a deal like that that may have little or nothing to do with just where does the money come from. I don't know. I guess some people have like concerns with their financial backing. Is that what's the deal with Atari that people don't like?
There's a lot of things about it. I know, like, one of the biggest controversy. I mean, like, this is just all, like, I feel like there's a lot of controversial things we're talking about here. But no, like, one of the biggest things is like, people think like the main reason why Atari bought off Night Dive was because of Blood and stuff like that, because there was a lot of rights issues with that. But I know like a lot of things like what people mention are kind of just like really bad developments with Atari and stuff like that. Like, a lot of their games are like half-assed and stuff like that or something like that. I know that's like one of the biggest things, and there's like a lot of other reasons too. Like, people just have their mixed opinions about it, and honestly, like, in my opinion, I've been kind of mixed about it. But you know what, like, it's not really fair to just say like, like, oh, this is gonna be a really crap year, because they haven't even started yet. They haven't done anything yet, so there's no reason to hate them right now or something like that. Just give them a chance. Maybe this is like, for people who do hate Atari, maybe this is something they're gonna do to redeem themselves or something like that. You never know. So it's just, it's you just have to give it time there, and it's a done deal. So it's not like anything you're gonna say is gonna change anything, anyways. But yeah, people had their opinions, and some people just stay with it until the end of time or something like that. But yeah,
it's like trying to count the waves in the ocean, man. Like who cares? I hope they continue to make badass stuff that I like, and otherwise, whatever. It's out of my control, right? Like I think people worry too much in general.
Yeah. Plus, I think you and I both know the internet can be a toxic place.
Well, it certainly can be, but
definitely.
I mean, hey, I'd rather them get it out there than in the streets. Hell yeah. So
definitely.
So, did we want to talk any more about like In the Keeps games, or were you just interested in talking podcast stuff? What do you have on your agenda?
Whatever you got, man. If you want to talk about it, what are some of the games you do over at In the Keeps? I know you mentioned one of them.
Yeah. So for the last, I don't know, year or so, like I haven't even done In the Keep podcast because we basically I've been working full time at 3D Realms, and then we're doing the development of Stellar Valkyrie. So I announced that game at like Realms Deep 2021, I believe, and then it's obviously still in development. So it's one of those, I keep coming back to it, like don't announce your shit too early, because it'd be way cooler if it was a surprise. But yeah, Stellar Valkyrie is awesome. It's a Doom engine game that's like a space opera basically, but you play as a Falcon named Falco. He's a bounty hunter, so he's kind of like this sort of dad joke Han Solo kind of character. And it's all just like a silly, fun Doom engine game. I fucking love it. I wrote the entire story for it. You're traveling to each level's like a kind of a different planet with a different sort of landscape, or there's like Volcano Planet, and there's space dock that you can just like park your ship on and get out and go shopping. It's really I wouldn't say that we're trying to push the Doom engine to its maximum. So like you have other projects that are out there like Age of Hell, that's just like the most insanely complicated, beautiful map making in the whole world. Stellar Valkyrie is much more of a condensed experience than that, and it's not something that's supposed to be technically impressive. It's just the kind of game that I wanted to play. So gotcha. If you like the Adventures of Square, it's very reminiscent of that.
Are we talking original Doom engine or like GZ Doom modified? Or?
GZ Doom. Yeah, GZ
gotcha.
Doom. So you can't really like publish something with the original Doom engine. But ever since they removed the need for an IWAD in GZ Doom, people have been able to publish games on Steam and GOG and such with it. Hedon was like a great example. It was just like I had a friend who was an amazing programmer and level designer, and another friend who was an amazing artist, and I was like, what if we put our heads together, threw a little bit of money at it, and see what happens? So yeah, you could wishlist that game now, Stellar Valkyrie, and then Call of Seregnar is our other game, and that's it's one of those things where I linked up with the lead developer on it, and I was like, I just fell in love with the game, and I was like, I want to do anything that I can to help. So I ended up being the producer, project manager kind of person, and handling a lot of the logistical stuff while Damian focuses on development. But it's an old school RPG, so it's very, very heavily influenced by specifically Betrayal at Krondor, but like also kind of like the Daggerfall era of RPGs, party based. And yeah, it uses all. If you've never played Betrayal at Krondor or don't know what that is, it's an amazing early RPG where every character that you meet in the world, so like if you talk to a merchant or you talk to the queen at a castle or whatever, they're all actual photos that have been digitized of real people that are dressed in Renaissance style clothing and everything. And we have been doing exactly the same thing with Call of Seregnar. Like a lot of the characters that you see now featured in the game were photographed at like Renaissance fairs in Italy. We've had fans even like get green screens and get their own cosplay garb and put it on and like, hey, can I be the Baron or something like that? And like, hell yeah, you can. just sign this paper and we got you. I even hired a cosplay group that I like met in person. I was like, you guys are cool and you have a lot of medieval stuff, and just arranged like a 2-day long photo shoot with all of these different people to like in different outfits, and like, okay, we're gonna use these for the game now. So it's really fun to work on, and also it's just like it makes this really cool immersive RPG experience. It's very calming. I almost wanted them to just take the walking from the game and publish it separately as just a walking simulator where you literally just walk. It's got a classical music composition by a guy named Tony Manfredonia. The theme song was like published by a symphonic orchestra in Budapest. So
Cool.
yeah, that kind of shit. And then the sound design is like all Foleyed by a guy named Ben Reichstein, who also works with me at 3D Realms. He's like probably the best Foley sound designer like in games right now, or at least that's not of like an older era of sound designers. But yeah, everything in the game is like an actual sound that Ben like crawled into a cave or like put on mud flippers and walked through a forest or some shit. Recorded. It's really cool, very immersive. It's a Patreon back though, so it's one of those situations I was describing earlier where it takes it's been announced and it's going to remain announced until it comes out, and it will probably take a long time because RPGs are a lot of work and it's a 5-person team and everybody's working on it part-time. If we get an insane publishing deal, like somebody who's like really cool to work with and is willing to just like put Damian out of his day job and onto that game full time, it would escalate it a lot faster, but that is not the case right now.
Gotcha.
You could also wishlist it.
Oh, cool,
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. That's definitely some good stuff to look forward there. We just hit our 1 hour mark there. So, is there anything last minute you wanted to say to our audience here, or anybody out there who's watching?
Shout out to Smango. Shout out to Amorpher. I see Steph in chat asking about Dina. You can meet Dina. You know how you can meet Dina? Get a green screen and go buy yourself some fancy gear that would make you look like you're from like 1400s Slovenia, and send us in some photos, and then maybe we could like put you in a scene where you're like buying a beer from Dina or some shit. I don't know. That would be Dina is the bartender in Call of Sir Ragnar for those not following along, and is also my profile picture. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then, is there anything I do have the link to the In the Keep in the description there, guys. So go ahead and check that out. But was there anything else you wanted to promote? Any like social media or anything like that?
Yeah, inthekeep.com. Definitely, you can find all the old podcasts, and you can find Field and Foley podcast on there. That's relatively new. That's Ben, who I was just talking about, basically interviewing all the best people in sound design. Of course, Wishlist, Sir Ragnar, and Stellar Valkyrie. Those are both like my babies. Then everything 3D Realms you can find at 3drealms.com. The biggest thing I'd say to focus on this, so this is out live now. So as of recording, it is 4 of August. So September 30th, Realms Deep. Tune in on 3D Realms' Twitch channel, YouTube, everywhere. And the saga continues. I will be crossing paths with Mike Jared from Running with Scissors again. So enjoy that. And just be cool to people. Like, much love, everybody. That's it.
Got some I'm hyped for Realms Deep there, so some people are excited for that there, but yeah, definitely thank you for coming on there, Mother Load. I always like having the big boys come on to my podcast and tell me how to do podcasting properly, but no, this was definitely a fun time. I appreciate you coming on here and spending the time there and sharing all the information that you did, especially with the Realms 3D stuff there. That was very cool stuff there. A lot of that I didn't even know, so thank you for sharing that. But that's going to go ahead and conclude for episode 8 of Squid QE podcast with guest. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you for coming on, Motherload there, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Peace.
Yeah, definitely peace.